Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com, setting the record straight about climate. On this date in both 1934 and 1935, there was some incredible weather in the United States. A three-day heat wave at the end of May 1934 brought 100-degree weather from Texas up into the northern plains. The purple dots represent places with 100-degree temperatures, and the red dots represent places with 90-degree temperatures. This was the map for May 29, 1934. On May 30, 1934, the heat wave extended further north and further east, and it reached its peak on May 31, 1934. There were 110-degree temperatures in South Dakota and 109-degree temperatures in Iowa. Iowa hasn't seen temperatures anywhere near that hot during summer in recent years, much less during May. If we had weather that hot now, climate scientists would almost certainly claim that they were 100% certain it was due to the increase in carbon dioxide. But carbon dioxide levels were very low in 1934. This is the U.S. Weather Bureau map from May 1934 showing the mean temperature departure from normal. Almost the entire country was burning up, and parts of South Dakota, Iowa, and Nebraska were 12 degrees above normal. The worst drought in U.S. history occurred during 1934. In May of 1934, two-thirds of the country was in drought. And by July 1934, three-quarters of the country was in drought, and half the country was in extreme drought. Let's take a look now at how unusual the May 1934 weather was. This graph shows the average May maximum temperature at all United States Historical Climatology Network stations. You can see that 1934 was by far the hottest May, and 1935 was by far the coolest. I'll be talking about 1935 at the end of this video. Over the past century, May maximum temperatures have been declining in the United States. During May of 1934, 16% of afternoon temperatures recorded in the United States were over 90 degrees Fahrenheit. The only other year which came close to that was 1962. You can see that 90-degree weather during May was much more common in the United States prior to the year 1970. Since the year 1970, 90-degree weather during May in the United States has become much less common. This graph shows the May percent of days above 95 degrees Fahrenheit or 35 degrees Celsius. As you can see, May 1934 really stood out as being quite exceptional. I find this next graph really interesting. It's the May percent of stations in the United States which reached 95 degrees sometime during the month. During May of 1934, more than half of the United States reached 95 degrees sometime during the month. Compared to recent years, we've been closer to 10%. You can see that during the 1920s, 1930s, and 1940s, 95-degree days were quite common during May in the United States. So how did the press report on this? This is from the Cairns Post in Australia. World heating up, ice dissolving at poles. Sea will rise 40 feet. And this was going to wipe half of England off the map. The Los Angeles Times said, Hand of Nature falls heavily on whole world in freak weather year of 1934. Cold, heat, drought, and floods set new marks. How science accounts for berserk elements. Unprecedented extremes recorded in every corner of the earth. Even climate has changed in spots. Scientists had all different theories about what was causing the freak weather, ranging from sunspots to meteorological cycles. The head of the U.S. Weather Bureau said, Worldwide drought is seen likely. Weatherman admits there is something wrong and that no one knows why. The Mercury in Australia on June 4, 1934 said, World drought, farmers' ruinous losses, almost universal disaster. Europe revives pagan rites. England was having their worst drought in nearly 100 years. The Guardian reported on May 12, 1934, New York darkened by vast dust cloud, freak weather in the United States, heat wave and drought hit the farmers, high temperatures in Britain. On January 19, 1934, the Sydney Morning Herald reported on a heat wave in 3 states and bushfires in South Australia. The head of the United States Weather Bureau said that the drought in the United States was unparalleled in duration, scope, and intensity. The drought, now covering 3/4 of the United States, will breed upon itself until some major climatic disturbance occurs to break it up. 1934 was the hottest and driest year on record in the United States, so let's look at how climate scientists account for it now. Well, just as you might expect, government climate scientists in the United States don't make any attempt to account for it. they simply erase it. This animation flashes back and forth between the NASA 1999 version of U.S. temperatures and the NASA 2017 version. In the 1999 version, 1934 was the hottest year. But NASA scientists erased the heat of the 1930s. They cooled 1934 by more than half a degree Celsius, and they warmed 1998 by an equal amount. This is standard operating procedure for government climate scientists. They alter data rather than doing actual science. What they're doing is best described as policy-based evidence making. These NASA scientists are making no attempt to do legitimate science. They have an agenda, and they're altering the data in order to push the agenda. A real scientist would want to know what caused the heat of the 1930s. But the weather of the 1930s wasn't just typified by heat. There was both record heat and record cold. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, May 1934 was the hottest May in the United States, and May 1935 was the coolest. Let's look at 1935 now. April of 1935 brought the worst dust storms in U.S. history. And then on this date in 1930, several locations in Colorado had unbelievable amounts of rain. This is from climate historian Christopher Burt. In an event that strains credulity, an astonishing 24 inches of rain fell in 6 hours, 22.8 inches of which fell in just 4 hours at 2 locations in eastern Colorado on the afternoon and evening of May 30th, 1935. This rain caused massive flooding and heavy loss of life in eastern Colorado and in Nebraska. But the weather wasn't done yet. On the following day, Texas set the world's record rainfall. On May 31, 1935, Woodward Ranch, Texas had 22 inches of rain in 2 hours and 45 minutes. This chart shows U.S. record short-term rainfalls. As you can see, almost all of them were set a long time ago when carbon dioxide levels were much lower. Climate scientists claim that increased carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere have led to more extreme rainfalls in recent years. But actual data shows that the most extreme rainfalls occurred a long time ago. Record rainfall was occurring in Colorado and Texas around Memorial Day in 1935. And then on Labor Day came the most intense hurricane in U.S. history. The winds were so strong in the Florida Keys that it blew this train 30 feet off the tracks. As an actual scientist, I would love to know what caused the extreme weather of the 1930s. But billions of dollars of funding is poured into government climate science to push an agenda, so there's not much actual science getting done. This is unfortunate because government scientists have become the official prophets and policy makers of the political left, and many of them are extremely dishonest. In order to get our civilization back, people are going to have to develop a much better understanding of science. Toto is doing that one video at a time. Please visit him on the web at realclimatescience.com. He's been pulling back the curtain on junk science and propaganda for a long time.